Hello everyone and welcome back to Trainz 12 doing a time lapse of another route. This route is a route that I've been working on forever, it seems. It's been a number of years, and this is actually a route you've probably seen before in some of my very early train speed builds. This route is massive. Or actually it was massive before I split it into two, but I can discuss more on that later. I decided to get some more high quality assets, higher quality track and stuff, and I'm currently replacing that right now, and I'm going to give you a nice flyover of the area we're working on today. This is a port. A lot of train traffic is going to be here, a lot of industry traffic. You can see lots of warehouses, shipping buildings, intermodal facilities, track that doesn't really obey the laws of physics. And as we get down here to this end, you see that there's an airport as well to be serviced. So this is a really, really busy area, lots of local traffic, lots of yard work, lots of commuter traffic, and it'll be a really interesting area for both the engineer and the dispatcher to manage. So as we enter the time lapse here, I'm just deleting track and replacing it, reworking it, because the way it's currently built, it just doesn't make any sense. A lot of it was a rush job and it just looked terrible. So it took some time to redo this area. You can see I'm laying down track, trying to make connections back to the outside world, just to the north and west of this, kind of referring to the compass. If you have the ability to look at it for more than 5 seconds without throwing up, there's a massive train yard for those through freights to come and stop and unload and all that jazz. Then they access this port area. So a little bit on this route. Like I said, you've probably seen it in the very early train speed builds that I've done before I worked on the Topham-Hat Mountain Railroad and the Barclay Super Granary. Originally, it was a route that was about 110, 120 miles long, and it had two massive urban areas, like huge, big cities, New York, LA type size cities with mini industries and things like that. And during testing and during loading and just during building, I realized that the two main areas just weren't going to work with each other. One end of the route kind of set in Canada, with forestry, lumber, coal, and then a massive international border crossing. And then this end of the layout that we're working on now was kind of more of a Pacific Northwest type inspiration, California inspiration, mountains, forests, seaside industries, with the original idea being, I want to take a 100-car intermodal train and actually feel like I'm going somewhere and doing something, not just driving it for 100 miles down a path. And during testing, I realized that it just didn't work. It just didn't work. The route was too big, there were too many trains to manage, and it bogged down the computer, and it just wasn't really playable. And on top of that, trying to make sense of the climates, you got out of the Canadian city border crossing, you went through mountains and then desert, and then all of this happened within like 20 miles, and it just didn't make any sense. So the transition from one environment to the other just didn't make any sense, and I thought maybe it'd be better, because each end of the layout had different train lines. They had their own commuter networks and stuff all mapped up, to just separate them. They're two completely different routes now, and I think it makes a lot more sense. There'll be a lot more continuity in the rolling stock and the railroads that will be occupying the route, and I think it'll just work a lot better. So separated the routes, and now I'm just kind of modernizing all the bits and pieces. I'll eventually have to make a route tour video, because like I said, the scope of this route really isn't shown in this footage. So right now we're working on the airport area, making a new place for the aviation fuel drop-off, and how I'm going to manage the passenger traffic. You saw that we already laid new track for the intermodal yard for containers to be loaded and unloaded. There is supposed to be more industry past the airport to the north, which would be to the right at this very moment. Eventually going to put more industry up there. I'm not going to say what it's going to be at this point, but it may or may not be airport related. So now I'm trying to build the commuter flyover to figure out how am I going to get the commuter trains back to where they're supposed to go, and really don't want them to interact with the freight traffic, because beforehand they were kind of on the same level as the freight traffic, and during testing that ran into a lot of problems, especially because there's so much yard work and yard activity in a seaport that having through commuter traffic to the airport just wasn't working very well. So I had to design this commuter flyover so that it, made sense and it went logically. You can see that, fighting with grades and raising up the land and everything like that. So I just decided to fly the commuter train over. I thought about trying to retain the original level, at level with the freight traffic, but I realized that wasn't possible with what I wanted to do. I really wanted to restore, there was a train yard for commuter traffic by the airport originally, and I really wanted to put that back in. I think it really needs that to store some commuter trains by the airport, because this is about 20-25 miles away from the big city. So right now I'm looking at where I'm going to put all of that stuff, and I think right here, just to the right there, is about the most perfect spot to do it. So I'm going to start laying some track here to make basically a parking area for commuter trains to store them so that they are available to use at that end of the route. I'm still trying to figure out how to make a good yard. It's kind of difficult. And I know there's a bunch of tips and tricks that can be used, but just kind of clicking and moving and dragging and hit the track straightening tool and stuff, it'll look sort of pretty and act somewhat realistic, I hope. But some play testing will definitely reveal if it has any major faults. Yeah, just trying to get everything straight. It's being a bit of a pain. That should be good enough. So that's the commuter staging yard. We'll just get some track ends on so you don't fall off the cliff on the other side. Put some buffers in and make sure they're actually on the track. That looks good. And so there we go, you have a tiny commuter yard, you can store some commuter trains, and this highway was originally running through and some connecting roads to get to the passenger station of the seaport, and I just decided that was a load of crap, so I got rid of that, put some grocery warehouse next to the food warehouses there. That's what those orange buildings are. In the original route you were to grab, that was supposed to be like a tropical fruit warehouse for Canadians. So, your pineapples and all that stuff that you don't have in Canada. You just pick up there, then you truck them all the way across the route to a fruit warehouse that was on the Canadian side. So I decided to turn that just into a general import for food. As I remove the highway, there was a highway there, and it just wasn't put in well, and it was hideous. Unfortunately, all of my Proto-Lars Industries crashed, so every single Proto-Lars track on my route needed to be replaced. There was a defunct asset that apparently needed to be updated in the DLS, and I didn't catch it until after I put the layout on, so all of my Proto-Lars needs to be replaced, which sucks, but I guess it means I can fine-tune it to make sure everything works properly. So I'm just testing here to see, how many freight cars can I put in. I'm looking at about maybe 10 or so to fit in, and now I'm just trying to find a better platform to use, because that one I have there is a little too narrow. I think that one will be good. So you get 10 reefers and boxcars in there, and easily sortable. Yeah, there we go. That looks That looks fantastic. That's right where the 10 cars are, so we'll just delete that and make them that long. And then we'll just make an industry track the easiest way we know how. Copy and paste. Okay, going along now, I'm just gonna create the little track here and there and make it so that it looks good, nice and straight, bends nice and logically, so that cars aren't, you know, getting hooked around at 90-degree angles. Gonna add our buffers in, and then we'll add I'll add the Proto-Lars later. A lot of the Proto-Lars industries are very general. Like, it'll just say Proto-Lars food or Proto-Lars lumber, and it'll have a list of like 30 things that each industry can load. And sometimes what I like to do is I like to go into the DLS and the content manager, and I duplicate like the Proto-Lars food, and then I reduce the number of products to be what I need, and so it's specific to my use, which is really, really helpful. It means you don't have to sift through a whole bunch of commodities to find the exact one you want. And if you have 4 different flowers or something in your Proto-Lars, you don't have to worry about, you know, picking the wrong one. When you know, transport the flower to someplace, you have to make sure it's that specific one, or else you completely break your industry system. So now I'm just joining up the this warehouse here with the main line, and to finish, I'm going to build this auto port, which I originally had in here. This is supposed to be a place where you park your auto racks, and the cars got exported, and I just kind of threw it in here just so that you had a place to put the auto racks during testing, and never really detailed it. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Come over here, grab some dock pieces so that it looks somewhat good. Yeah, that'll work. Probably should get an actual car hauling ship. That one can just be a good placeholder for now. I wish the dock here that I had a dock end like this one that I grabbed. You just gotta make the land match up, and then yeah, we gotta eliminate that track. The track just looks ugly, and the jointed rail track just looks so much better. So I'll throw some track in. I wanted to measure so that you could have at least, you know, a lot of auto rack trains. I couldn't read the numbers here just on the post commentary what it was, but I just wanted to have a good amount of auto racks because that's going to be a big component of this route, our auto rack cars. And so I need a lot of tracks for them, so I put in 7 tracks. Yeah, 7 tracks of auto racks, and now I just need to find a way to offload them. I'll put these nice ramps in. Nice ramps were found on a DLS. Really makes the auto rack track, you know, fit in. It makes it actually look proper. Now I'm going to build the area where they store the cars for importing and exporting. Kind of a small area here, I know. So it's going to be, you know, it's not going to look completely realistic. I think a real port would be a lot larger, but we can just say that that's modeled off the map there, you know, off to the side, off the baseboard. So you saw that I'm looking at specific cars. This layout features several car based industries, the big ones being a Chrysler plant and a Mercedes-Benz plant. So I'm filling the auto export-import lot with Chryslers and Mercedes-Benz because those are the main cars that we will be exporting through this port. So just kind of throwing cars around in there and making it so they look halfway decent. You know, you get several hundred, you know, thousands of cars in there. I really didn't want to go much beyond the track limits, but that will work. And so a little tower I put in there kind of to be a bit of a headquarters or something, definitely to be detailed a bit more later. I can tell at this point I was starting to get a little bit tired. Sometimes this game is really exhausting for putting down scenery. It's just sometimes gets so meticulous that I just get burnt out. So that's why a lot of areas in my layouts look unfinished. So this is the end right now. We'll leave you with this, and I will see you in the next episode.